Hello and welcome to this panel on the policy ecosystem for EVs in India. And we have an exciting lineup of panelists to share their thoughts on the topic. I'm your host, Gautam Srinivasan, and joining me are Harsha Kolla Ramajalu, who's the CTO at SemaConnect, and Pankaj Dubey, who's the CEO and Managing Director for Power Global India. Both of them are highly experienced in working at the intersection of tech, energy, and automotives. I'd like to thank both of them for joining us on the panel. Thank you very much for taking the time, gentlemen. A wide-ranging topic, so we'll try to compress it as much as possible in the limited time that we have. So let's start with the broad strokes. A recent report from the World Resources Institute India cites 12 states in India as standouts for their EV policies, with consumer incentives, charging infrastructure incentives, and industry incentives being offered to support and nurture an EV transition. So, what's happening on the ground from your vantage point? What's your view on the outcomes that these incentives could create for the EV ecosystem? We'll start with you, Harsha, and then hear Pankaj's views.
Sure, Gautam. If you see the worldwide scenario, there hasn't been a single country where EVs have taken off without strong governmental support, both from a policy measures as well as incentives. This is very important when you look at and sort of a nascent industry like EVs. In the initial days, it's bound to be a little more expensive to adopt the EVs, but as the time goes along, it becomes cheaper, and it gets adopted widely. And I do believe that we do have some EV policies, especially some of the states are doing pretty well. Especially my home state, Karnataka, actually has a pretty good incentive policy for EV industry itself, both from a perspective of actually EV buyers as well as the industry incentives for creation of infrastructure as well as creation of industries. So that's very important.
All right. Pankaj, your view on the outcome of this 12 state competition which is happening and the raft of incentives which are coming around, and what sort of impact it will have on the EV ecosystem. Your view on the ground.
Yeah, so it's always good to see government competing with each other. We only see that mostly in the private sector, but to states to compete and come out with policies to support EV is really encouraging. And I see a very enthusiastic response from some of the states, and this has really created a competition amongst the 12 as well as others who have not announced. So they are also in a hurry to do something on the EV. So this really builds up a sort of a background on everybody to prepare. But what's happening on the ground, I think a lot more needs to be done. The incentives have been announced. The implementation needs to be seen that, okay, whether what has been announced, what is the outcome on the ground. What we see today, there is basically the incentives to the consumers in FAME 2 or some others which is being implemented, but there are a lot more areas where government need to rethink on the policies and make it more attractive for the end user as well as the companies to come together and create this EV market.
All right. Now, the next question is, on the one hand, the government has domestic production priorities in mind for the EV ecosystem. And on the other hand, global car manufacturers like Volkswagen and Tesla are calling for lower EV import duties. So in your opinion, how should priorities be balanced to develop the EV ecosystem where global expertise can be effectively leveraged to create a robust domestic EV supply chain? Pankaj, your view?
I think the manufacturing happens at a place where there is demand. You can't have a manufacturing setup where there is very little demand. And in order to increase the demand, if we have to lower the duties, import duties, it should be welcomed and it should be announced. Because what happens is that if Tesla comes and if Volkswagen comes into India and other players also start competing, then the entire ecosystem, the base of the vendors and everything will get developed. And we are missing right now whether the chicken should come up first or the egg should come out first. We have to look at that the demand has to go up, and for the demand to go up, number of steps need to be taken. And I think there is no competition because these companies do not have any domestic competitor here who will get affected. And the addition of Tesla and addition of Volkswagen is only going to create more demand in the country. And I think we must encourage that. We must do that in order to create facilitate the EV movement in the country. I still feel that if the government does that, it will act nothing less than a catalyst to the entire EV plans that India government has.
All right, Harsha, your response to that?
Yeah, look, I mean, if you look at this industry itself, can India manufacture electric vehicle on its own? We do have companies like Tata who have actually brought out a decent electric vehicle now, the Nexon. But having said that, if you see the cutting edge features within EV, as well as even in case of Tata, there is a big component of that car itself, which is imported. So there is no escaping imports in this particular technology. So we need to have sort of a differential treatment for EVs in the import policy. Otherwise, actually, we'll be shooting ourselves in the foot.
All right.
I would say, just to add, what a suggestion that the government can have a dual thing. They can say, okay, for 5 years there is like 5% or 0% import duty, and after 5 years you have to manufacture in the country. So some sort of that arrangement should be done for at least to build up this market.
A special relaxation mechanism.
Yeah, to add to that, I mean, to actually set up a car manufacturing plant, or to actually do a ground up manufacturing lineup over here, it would actually take a huge investment, and no company would be willing to do that kind of an investment without knowing how their products will take off in India. So at least in the initial phase, for a few, I mean, it need not be time bound. It could be saying that you can sell, say, about 10,000 cars at a reduced import duty. After that, you have to go to the regular regime. That also actually gives them the confidence that, okay, I mean, our products are acceptable here, it works over here. That also actually brings the latest technology to India as well.
All right, that demand side problem is what I want to focus on there, and you could add it onto your views that you had, Pankaj, which is that like the broad targets. The Niti Aayog suggests that India could achieve 30% of EV penetration for private cars and 80% for 2 and 3 wheelers by 2030. But again, if I look at the sales numbers, right, FY21 sales, they show a contraction of the 2 and 3 wheeler EV segment on the back of the pandemic. Although EV passenger car sales did double sales, but from a low base. Now, considering pandemic still muting EV sales and a recovery based on demand that hinges on sustained stronger economic growth, do you think those targets can be met? And if sales don't go up quickly, how would that impact the broader ecosystem? Following up to what Harsha had said, Pankaj, what's your view on this?
See, basically, when you study this plan that Niti Aayog has, there is nothing wrong in making a plan, but what is required to do is to follow up with the actions which should match with the plan that we have. Now, if I see some of the policies that have come, now, if I see the total market in the country, the EV contribution today is like, for the old vehicles which are plying already on the door, almost like 99.67% is the fossil fuel vehicles. Only a small 0.023% is electric. And even today, the contribution what we are doing every month is less than 1% in the universe of the market in India. So therefore, 99% is still fossil fuel being added. So under that circumstances, where there is a legacy of old vehicles and the fresh vehicles also are getting added of fossil fuel, which will have a life of 15 years as per the Government of India policy, then how do you think that 80% vehicle in 30 years would be there? So there is only one policy which can really make it, and that is a retrofit kit policy, where it makes sense for the end users, for the people who have already bought the vehicle, who are riding right now, to get the retrofit kit, the way that we have seen in CNG and LPG kits. So we do that, and that makes a difference. And that may spur for the benefit, because why EV market is not taken off is because of a number of reasons. One, infrastructure is not there, good quality products are not there, and all of that is because of the cost targets, because of the the customers' expectations and the problems that they face if they buy an electric vehicle, the range issue, all that anxiety comes in. In order to solve all of these, the one thing that I would say that the government has to do is to figure out how we can increase the vehicles on the road. And for that, retrofit is one policy. But when I see the FAME 1 and the FAME 2, in FAME 1, retrofit policy was there and there were incentives over there. In FAME 2, it has been removed. So that's I see that there is some mismatch, and I would like to see that this is maybe there's a omission by error, but it has to be taken it, because if the government is serious about getting this done, it is not possible without retrofitting.
All right. Some consistency. And as you mentioned, CNG retrofitting is a good example for wider adoption. So let's see if the government listens to what you have to say. But Harsha, your view on this, the targets that I mentioned, do they seem too ambitious in the context of where we are right now? Or do you think if say fuel prices continue to remain at record highs, maybe the demand will just come organically?
Yeah, I have a different point of view. I'm an optimist in terms of the overall adoption of the EV itself, because if you see the world market, the way actually things are progressing, India will follow what happens in the general world market. We can't be actually left behind. We typically leapfrog, some generations at times in actually adopting the technology. So when world market adopts the electric vehicles in a big way, I don't think India is going to be lagging behind at that point of time, because most of the automakers will actually switch over to EV. Then what are you going to buy, right? So I do believe that it is a completely achievable target. I was skeptical about 100% by 2030, which I think government itself has realized is not achievable, but 30% should be achievable. And I do agree with Pankaj that we need to have multiple strategies for India, which are going to be slightly different than what the world has adopted. Probably, I think in India, even many studies that I have seen actually shows that two-wheelers and three-wheelers are going to be the first, vehicles which are going to be electrified, and especially three-wheelers. They are going to be extremely skeptical about actually buying a new vehicle, which is going to cost them a few lakhs of rupees, because their investment actually is going to be a problem. So there are two challenges there. One is the financing problem. The second one is if there is a retrofit that can actually convert what is already existing, so that that burden is lesser for those people.
All right, fair point. Point taken. Now, India is startup country for the tech sector. Harsha, you have extensive experience in the tech space, and I want to ask you a question. What role do you see startups playing in the EV ecosystem, even as larger players such as, say, Tata Power or Reliance make their respective moves?
Oh, there are a lot of startups that are happening in the EV space. So a lot of things are going to happen. EV is an entirely disruptive sort of an ecosystem. It is actually going to disrupt, and I think in the next couple of decades we are going to see a lot of established names are going to be threatened by what is going to happen. And whenever technology has come in, we started this company, our company 11 years back in the charging space. At that time also we were actually saying, what is an electric vehicle? It is basically a smartphone on wheels, right? It has a battery, it has complete tech over there. Okay, you actually just put the wheels and the motor and you have a electric vehicle. So it is ripe for disruption in many ways. In fact, actually some of those ways you won't even be able to imagine at times. Who would have thought that an complete startup would actually make an excellent product like Ather, right? Just a decade back, I don't think I would have imagined that an Indian company would make an excellent product like that. And to think about, going back about 20 years back, we already had an electric vehicle. Reva actually was already there in India, and it was probably ahead of its time, but it did make its presence felt, at least in the Bangalore roads here, right? So,
it's a name which is
totally believe that,
recognized, so that's something there.
Absolutely. So, I do believe that many startups will come. Some will click, some may not, but India is a startup country, so I have a good faith that a lot of them will come up with some amazing products.
Well, that's the optimist in you speaking. Pankaj, what's your view on this? The role of startups and them playing an important role in the EV ecosystem. You come from an extensive automotive experience. What's your point of view on this?
Yeah, I come from an extensive auto experience, leading some of the mass products, and now I'm into a startup. So I've led 3 startups as of now. So I see in the EV space, it is the startups are going to play a major role, and the disruption, as Harsha said, is going to come from them. We have seen this happening globally as well. People who have never been in automobile have come up with a plan and they have succeeded, because the kind of a technology that is needed today is in the EV space is very different from what it was in the automotive space. The number of parts, like in a vehicle, is like more than 500, 600, in some cases 1,000 plus, and in an EV is just less than 50. So the kind of investments that you need to do to make a traditional automobile and the investments that you need to do in an EV is very different, and a much lower volume you can start. And I have seen some of the very small startups, and they're doing pretty well in India itself. So I would see that, for the disruption, you would expect more startups to do that than the existing players.
All right. For the disruption, wait and see what the startups do. Well, we will all be waiting and watching and seeing what's the new horizon going to be for the EV ecosystem as more interesting startups come in. But talking about the other side of the challenges, you've spoken about the demand side. From a supply side, the charging infrastructure challenge remains. Yesterday, in fact, I had a chat with Jyoti Malhotra of Volvo, who mentioned that a public-private partnership model could be the fastest way to develop the charging infrastructure in India. Considering only 1,800 EV charging stations were up, I guess, till March this year, versus a projected need for 4 lakh stations by 2026. Harsha, given your experience at Semiconnect, your view on this and any suggestions of best practices for the PPP model to work in meeting that target?
Sure, Gautam. So charging infrastructure is capital intensive. So in the initial days, anybody who sets up a charging station may not be seeing an immediate return on his investment. So certainly there has to be an public-private partnership. For example, one of the challenges that charging infrastructure will have is where are you going to put up these charging stations, right? The real estate itself. I know of people, in the sense industry friends, who have told that they wanted to put up some charging network, but actually they have to pay rent for the parking space where actually they have to put up this charging station. So it is going to actually cost you a monthly amount, both for the parking slot as well as actually the power that you're going to consume. And then you have to wait for someone to come and charge. So it is going to be a chicken and egg problem. So there has to be something that actually allows the government to actually provide that space. So if the space is available, then probably there are many people who can actually do charging as a service. In the sense they can actually set up the charging stations and provide the service and actually make their service fee over that, right? So that is very important. But there is also the other aspect, which is financing this entire thing. So currently, I don't think many banks would actually give you a loan if you said that I'm going to set up a charging business. So give me a few crores of rupees. They may not actually entertain you at all. So that needs to be addressed, and government certainly can play a role there.
All right. And also broadening that conversation, I was reading a report about the US market, and they said that, the solar market in the US has a lot of lessons to hold for the EV market, where they say that there's a lot of interagency coordination now within the solar market, which helps realize a lot of positive outcomes. Do you think somewhere a conversation around that also needs to be necessary? Because whenever we talk about public-private partnership, there's only one aspect that we talk about. But as you said, there's going to be zoning coming in. There's going to be other aspects when you need approvals. Plus, as you mentioned, banking, finance. So there's a whole lot of factors at play here. What's your view, Harsha?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Because, some innovative financing is what actually solved the problem for solar industry in US, right? So actually, if you see how the solar works in US nowadays, if you're putting a rooftop solar, you don't have to invest anything. Somebody will actually take care of that for you. I mean, they will do the investment. They'll put up the solar units on top of your home, and all you need to do is actually enter into an agreement which actually says that you're going to buy the power generated by those solar units, um, for your own consumption at a prefixed price, whatever price that you're currently paying to your utility, right? So over a period of 10-15 years, he recovers the money anyway, right? So there are actually models that are emerging, which are very innovative financial models. We need those kind of models for charging infrastructure as well in India. I do believe that the old PCO model, public call office model, that we used to have, prior to mobile phones, is something that is going to develop in India, especially for two-wheelers and three-wheelers. That is going to be absolutely necessary. So it's going to happen.
All right. Pankaj, from a mass segment perspective, public transportation perspective, is say a hybrid model of EV charging stations and a battery swap network the answer to broadening the reach of EVs outside of major cities of tier 2 or tier 3 areas?
Now, before getting into this, I have a viewpoint on a PPP. So I just wanted to share that.
Sure. You can add that in and then follow it up with the answer.
Yeah. So the PPP model, I think, in the infrastructure would not be very successful, because here, if we are looking at any model where we are looking at a support from the government, where they take care of because it's not working out, the government will pitch in into that. They won't. The model has to be what Mr. Harsha just said, that we have a solar panel and I just say that, okay, my rooftop is available, somebody will come, so he will gain out of it. The customer who's allowing it is gaining out of it. He gets a free access to the energy. And so it works out. But the moment it is like, because it's not working out, somebody comes in, it's not going to happen. To me, the PPP should happen in the cell manufacturing, because that is where the big problem is. That is where the big investment has to happen. That is where India would be always dependent upon import till the time that we have a strong player into the cell manufacturing. And I would say that is where government should get into, and that will build up a huge infrastructure, and that is where they should invest, and that is where the imports will get reduced, and it will be local manufacturing cells are available. It will be a big boost to the entire industry. Coming to your the big public transport, yes, the swapping is something where we are working. And we have a solution. We are going to create a charging infrastructure across the country, and we have a very interesting model without having a huge investments being done there. A smart, infrastructure we'll be doing, but that is basically necessity for a swapping, because if you are moving around from one place to another to stop and charge, it may take time, and the infrastructure again required would be big. So what is needed is a swapping mechanism where, whether it is a two-wheeler, three-wheeler, or a big buses, you're going like you go to a petrol pump and just get the refilling done in 2 minutes, less than 2 minutes. Same way, you just go and swap your existing battery, take your battery out, take a new battery, and just move along. And less than 2 minutes, you can be on the road itself. So that model of a swapping has to be developed, and that is integral part. And we have to get that technology going in India. Right now, most of the solutions that we have is non-swappable. It is mostly fixed batteries. But swappable infrastructure and swappable batteries have to be encouraged if you have to really make it the EV a reality. And as far as the I can't hear you.
Sorry, just to repeat that. So the hybrid model is what you see as the way forward, because charging infrastructure challenges do remain, and there is a swapping network which also needs to be developed. But if both of them are developed side by side, do you think it broadens the reach of EVs out of major cities to tier 2, tier 3 areas?
I am not a firm. I don't encourage hybrid at all. Hybrid means that we are not confident about EV. Hybrid means that
no. I don't mean hybrid as in hybrid cars. I'm saying a hybrid model where on the one hand you have the charging infrastructure, and on the other hand you have the swapping infrastructure. They can coexist side by side. Absolutely. And therefore you need to build both infrastructure so that then a whole lot of issues are addressed. So do you think that's the way forward?
We are going to do that. So we are doing that model only, where our swapping of our batteries would be done, and at the same time, the charging for any vehicle can be done. So this is a model which will work, and I think that's the most practical thing to do, not just in the tier 2, tier 3, but also in the tier 1 cities as well.
All right, Harsha.
Yeah, I have.
How does that,
definitely.
your own charging point model pan out? Since, as quoting the Jyoti interview, he also said that the niche segment that buys electric cars does not rely on public infra.
Which is true, but actually the people who are buying the electric cars will also need to travel long, and they will need public infra for doing that. That is one part. The second part is, there are two aspects to this. One is the public transport. The second is the private transport, right? The public transport, I think battery swapping is pretty good because where battery is owned by the battery swapping company, so the operator, whoever it is, whether it's a bus, whether it is an auto rickshaw or whatever, they can actually go to the swapping stations, and within 5 minutes they have full charge, and they can actually move on, and they can't care much about, in the sense, to actually stop there and actually wait for 1 hour or 2 hour or something like that for their vehicle to be charged. And that works very well there. But when it comes to private vehicles, you actually drive to office, or you would want to have charging infrastructure in office and charging infrastructure all over the place. So if you see, I think I remember reading a Pew Research report, which actually initially estimated that you would need 40% chargers to vehicles outside of the home. You're right. I mean, in the sense, majority of the people, almost everybody who owns an electric vehicle would have some charging facility at home. Almost 100%, right? But you also need to have that 20-30% extra charging stations in all over the place, whether it's a mall, whether it's offices, whether it is any kind of parking facilities, etc., airports, etc. So that is what the target market is for charging infrastructure creators, right?
All right. Before we wrap things up, I want to get your point of view and also some other challenges, especially skills shortage and, the workforce transformation issue. What's your point on addressing that, Pankaj?
Yeah, I think training is required, because not just for the skill set required for manufacturing, but even for driving the vehicle, even for the repair of the vehicle, it's completely different ballgame in an EV. So the training development has to be given a very high priority, and we have to look into it, that how do we train all the customers that they ride it. The way that you drive a petrol and diesel vehicle, if you drive the same way your EV vehicle, you will start complaining, or the range is less and all of that. So you have to understand this new technology, and for that, the training is required, and also all the repairs and all is totally digital. So everything is, you don't have any, except for few wheels that you have on the vehicle or some mirrors and all. Everything is digital. So you have to be very advanced on electronics to be able to repair or find out the fault of the vehicle and do it. It's something like, if you have a laptop and you have a problem today, you don't go to any workshop. You just call a number, and then they will do it. They'll take over your laptop and repair it then and there. So similar technology is going to come through EV in India, and therefore there is a different skill set required, and a lot of training and development is needed.
All right, Harsha, your view on this, because there's an entire chain, right from R&D to manufacturing to driving. Everyone needs to be retrained, and there needs to be an entire workforce transformation. So what's your view on addressing it?
Absolutely. If you look at, from a charging infrastructure perspective alone, there are quite a lot of challenges. For example, if you have to do these DC chargers, the skills that are needed are very complex. Even regular charging networks, although India is known for its IT capabilities and other things, to actually establish a large network and operate it is, it takes a lot of different skill sets to come together. So you need to make a safe charging station first. Then actually you need to have a 24/7 connectivity to the internet through some kind of a LTE network or through Wi-Fi or whatever, so that you could operate it, so that a driver can go authenticate, charge and pay for whatever he has consumed, etc. So something like that actually needs quite a lot of, because there are various standards that actually are in use worldwide. You need to actually learn that, there aren't many people who are actually well versed with those technologies, the protocols, etc. So those are the training that are needed, and it takes a while for somebody to get a hang of it. So yeah, I mean, there is a training challenge, and if you see the other part of it, in fact, actually there hasn't been any sort of safety certification processes in India. But now actually they are trying to bring in, ARIA is now doing it. But actually that is a other aspect of it, because in US, from the first year of our sales, we had to actually get it certified for safety with the UL standards that were there for safety. But here actually there weren't anything in the last 3-4 years. Actually, it wasn't necessary for you to certify your product before you actually install it on the ground. So and also various other aspects of how to actually build high capacity power electronics. For example, it's not an usual skill. It is not done. I mean, it is available. It's not that it's not available. To sort of purpose fit that into this particular domain is what is needed.
All right, let's bring this all together to a forward-looking statement, which I'll ask the both of you to wrap the conversation up, which is that when EVs become more mainstream in the Indian market, what changes do you foresee it enabling in the entire automobile ecosystems, from, say, dealership models to business models? How will things change? Pankaj, we'll come to you first and then Harsha. Pankaj, I believe you're on mute. If you could unmute yourself.
I'm sorry. Yeah, from a dealership perspective, there will be a big change because the requirement on the workshop would come down dramatically. The kind of because of the number of parts being reduced, so the kind of the vehicle reporting that will happen in their workshop will come down. So that necessarily they have to reduce the workshop area probably, and they have to be more adaptable to the change and do repairs and advices to the customers on through telecom and through video call and web calls. So those are the things that will need to be encouraged at the dealership level. Overall, in the marketplace, the roadside mechanics would face a lot of challenge because everything would be impacting their business the way that they do right now. They won't be able to do it because the products that will be centric to the brands and the technology and the kind of connectors and everything required to repair it would be different for different vehicles. So all that would undergo a big change. So I see a big change in the society also, because it will make a lot of people new jobs, new opportunities, but at the same time, it will also take off number of people who are there. Till the time that the old vehicles are there, they can sustain. But after that, they have to look for new opportunities. And the government of India will have to think on that what opportunities and what skill set we provide so that they can also be turned into the mainstream.
All right, Harsha, your summary statement on what happens, how do things change from dealership models to business models? We are already hearing ABB say tying up with an Audi to provide an end-to-end solution. So how will things change for the structure of the automobile ecosystem?
Yeah, I am not too sure about how the dealership model will change, because that's not exactly my area of expertise. So probably it may change somewhat because the skill sets needed are different. So they may actually have to change it. But I still believe that the dealerships are still needed, the service centers are needed, because your problem is not going to be gone, just because electric vehicles are there. It is going to be reduced, but it's not going to be gone. You are still
You think
going to
what
have
Tesla did can't be replicated here? The direct to customer model. I meant it from a dealership model from that perspective, right? That the car manufacturer directly sells it to the customer without, say, involving a dealership. Do you think such kind of things might happen here?
You could actually sell it to the customer, but you still need to have a point of contact where you're actually delivering it, where you're servicing it. You're not going to go away. I own 2 electric vehicles, right? So I have been actually using them. You do need periodic services. It is not like, it is completely service free, not as frequently as the fossil fuel vehicles, but you still need them, right? So one of the things that actually I see happening, one of the primary difference that I see as a EV driver is that, the habitual chain that you have of actually going and filling your gas, your petrol once a week or something like that. to what is called as sipping, which is every day I actually top up every day my battery, right? So wherever I get the opportunity, whether it's at home, whether it's at office, I always top up so that I have my battery full, right? So that is going to be an attitude change. It is almost like charging your mobile phone. You charge it every day. You're not going to actually have a mobile phone that is going to work for you. You fill it up, and then 1 week or 10 days, you're not going to actually recharge it again, kind of a thing. So
All
that
right.
is an
Using that mobile
attitudinal
phone
change.
example, what about revenue models then? Maybe there could be subscription models coming in for EV vehicles where, say,
Yeah.
the company just takes care of everything and you just have to pay a subscription charge. Do you think those kind
It
of
is
things will come then?
it is already there. I mean, if you see,
Hmm.
Nexon actually already has it, and subscription model was tried out by Mahindra, I think about 6 7 years back itself. 6 years back, actually, they had a sort of a battery subscription, not for the entire vehicle, but battery itself actually was taken care of by them. So it was a subscription model in that sense. It's certainly going to happen. You will have all sorts of different models, lease models, the subscription model, etc. So I mean, that is only to build the confidence with the people. Instead of owning it, you could go with this model, kind of a thing. But uh, overall, actually, what will happen is, over a period of time, people will realize that this technology is not bad, because EVs got a bad name initially because they used to use these lead acid batteries, which used to die every 2 3 years. And that there were some bad names because of that. I mean, sort of a bad reputation for EVs because of that. But today, if you see, the E2O that I have is already, it's closing in on 7 years now, and it hasn't had any problem. My range hasn't reduced. So those experiences will give a lot of confidence to others to adopt EV, especially the with the fuel price being what it is. What do you expect?
So
All
it's
right.
a from the dealership perspective, I would say, you know, it is Tesla model cannot be replicated in India. It maybe there will be some midway there, but it cannot be replicated because the kind of a trust that the people have and the way that they buy today, it is going to be very difficult for any company to try to create that. And recently, we have heard Ola Electric trying to do that. I have my own reservations on that. And about energy as a service, we at Power Global are planning to do energy as a service on a subscription mode. So we are
Hmm.
going to do that, and that's a huge advantage in the market that will create. Uh, and we have to understand that the EV market is not taking place because it's not working out for the customer. It's not very beneficial to the customer today. So you have to figure that out, and I think subscription will play a very big role in that.
All right, let's see where things progress. But for now, let's wrap up our discussion on the policy ecosystem for EVs in India as part of the EV Conclave. I'd like to thank both Harsha and Pankaj for sharing their insights on the topic. And it's been a wide ranging conversation. So thank you so much for taking the time and sharing with us your thoughts. And of course, thank you to our viewers for tuning in. This is Gautam
Thank you.
Srinivasan signing off.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you.